Good evening. My name is Katie Yates, and it's my pleasure to introduce MDIFW's Education and Outreach Supervisor, Laura Craver-Rogers, who will be presenting today on contributing your wildlife observations and other citizen science opportunities. We will be taking audience questions at the end of the presentation this evening, and just a reminder, this video is recorded and will be available on the department's YouTube library. So Laura, without further ado, I will let you take over.
Thank you, Katie. It is great to be here, and it is always wonderful to share information about the work that our department does and all the wonderful different projects. And today we're going to talk about ways that you can all contribute. So I'm just going to share my screen here so you can all see what is going on. Let me go ahead and start the presentation. All right. There we go. All right. So today we're going to be talking about contributing your wildlife observations, in other words known as citizen science. As many of you probably know, our MDIFW team is a very vast and very talented group of people. We have biologists, we have wardens, we have educators, we have people who work in the offices, a very wide variety and a very talented team. And they're doing all sorts of different work across the state of Maine to help conserve and preserve Maine's wildlife, fish, and wild places. And they do all sorts of things like checking on fish health, stocking fish, studying birds, preparing for their dogs for search and evidence operations. They're educating youth. They are looking for rare and endangered species. And maybe they're even doing things like tagging and banding wildlife that might be migratory, like geese. So there's a lot of different types of things that our wildlife biologist and our MDIFW team does. And here at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, we have a wide variety of animals that we work with in a lot of different places. There's invertebrates like bees and butterflies. There's reptiles and amphibians. There's all sorts of different bird species, mammals, fish species, not to mention all the different types of habitats, including many miles of waterways. And so across Maine, you can find all of this wildlife. Maine is very vast and beautiful and has a variety of habitats. And like I said, many, many miles of different types of waterways, streams, and lakes. And within that, there's all sorts of wildlife species. Now, one of the things that MDIFW does is they're tracking where many of Maine's priority wildlife species occur. And that can be a little bit tricky. So one of the things our biologists need to do is keep our databases current about the different species that live here in Maine. And sometimes it can be a challenge. Maybe the species are very widespread across the entire state, or maybe they're really cryptic and hard to find, or maybe they're uncommon. And because of these issues that sometimes we can be faced when trying to gather lots of data and information about our species, we really kind of rely on you, the Maine public, and your passion for helping us document wildlife. So tonight we're going to talk about how you can be a part of our team. So here you can see some very happy people holding a fish, taking data, looking at maybe some birds or butterflies through binoculars, right? Everywhere and everything that you could see out in nature could potentially be a part of a wildlife observation. That's an important piece of data for our biologists. Now, everybody can do this. It doesn't matter how big or small, though it is good for children to be accompanied by an adult. But it also doesn't matter how much time you have to give. There are all sorts of different types of projects that our team manages, where maybe you just occasionally submit observations, or maybe you dedicate yourself to a project and you regularly go out and collect information. Through citizen science, the greater public and people like you can help our scientists collect information and data using set protocols and data sheets. And having these different kinds of protocols is really going to help to make sure we're all collecting the same information, which can be really important when you're trying to compare different wildlife information, whether it's always collecting the length of something, the number of something. We want to be able to compare it to learn something about the wildlife population. Now, citizen science can also be called community science, and you can do it with friends, family. You can bring, if you're a grandparent, you can bring your grandchild out with you, or it can be a solo activity. There are a lot of different ways that a volunteer like you can get trained and learn about the different protocols to submit your data. Now, I keep saying data and protocols, and that might sound kind of boring, but it's actually very fun and can be a little addicting at times and can become a tradition. And, doing this citizen science work, maybe it's going to help increase your connection to the places that you're going, and can maybe expose you to new experiences or things you might not have seen before if you weren't focused on a certain activity. And maybe you'll see painted turtles laying eggs, or when you go paddling on the river, you'll see an observation of a bird species, or maybe some kind of turtle or frog or fish, and you can report that information. And so it's a lot of fun actually to get out there and do these projects, and it can be really great memories that you can share with others. Now, some of you might already be participating in citizen science. Believe it or not, if you hunt or you fish, you can be contributing to citizen science straight away. In fact, when people go out hunting, the animals that they're harvesting, the data collected from them is actually contributing information to our biologists to help them understand the population and management. You collect different types of data about sizes, is it male or female, all sorts of different types of things like that to help people understand the population better. If you're out fishing, you may have actually had a biologist come up to you while you're ice fishing, doing a survey, and they ask you about your catch. Information about the size and the species. And that's just one type of survey that you as a fisherman or an angler can contribute. And we'll talk about another way as well. So when you go out there, maybe you've already been spending a lot of more time outside this year, right? I know a lot of people are saying that they're going out and they're, maybe they're going hiking to new places, they're paddling more often, right? You're getting out there and you're experiencing Maine. And this is just another way that you can get out there and learn more about the places that you're going to. And while you're at it, contribute information. And so this is a great way. Maybe you're a school teacher, you homeschool, or you just want to increase your own education or for your children. What we do is we call this place-based learning. And citizen science, does just that. You're learning about the area around you. You're creating a deeper connection and you're helping out at the same time. So you are benefiting as well as the places around you are benefiting. You're learning in place. So it's definitely something I recommend for teachers as well. It can really help you increase your environmental-based education into your classroom, or as a parent, it's something you can do on school vacation, on weekends. Is a really fun opportunity you can do anywhere. The outdoors can be your classroom. So a lot of people say, well, I can't do this. I can't get around. Maybe you're not very mobile anymore, or you have some kind of issues, or you don't have a car, but you can do this anywhere that there's nature. So you could maybe be a backyard bird watcher, contributing observations about birds you see. Maybe you're going for a walk in a local park, or you're fishing just at the stream down the road. Anybody can do this, and we encourage you to share the experiences with your own family members as well. Obviously, always making sure you're safe and following any guidelines that you need, but really anybody can do this. And it's really fun to turn it into a tradition. So some great pictures here showing you how families are going out canoeing together and hiking and fishing. So just think about ways that you can make this a part of your routine. Maybe seasonally, it's something that you always go out and do. Well, where to begin? I want you guys to think about the fact that you all probably have some kind of passion, some kind of animal or thing that you like to do. And so there's going to be a citizen science project that you're going to be able to connect to. Maybe you like fishing. Maybe you like birding. Maybe you really like reptiles and amphibians. And I won't lie, I'm definitely one of those people. I love reptiles and amphibians. And maybe you don't want to always spend your time out at night. Maybe you're a morning person, right? There are a variety of projects. So right here on your screen is a whole bunch of different pictures. This is just to make the point that we have a lot of different types of citizen science projects. Some of these are not actively collecting data anymore, but it's just to show you that we have a wide variety of projects. Now, a lot of these are ones that we maintain as our biologists. Others are partnered programs across the state, because not only are Maine's people partners in this, but we also work with other organizations, universities, and schools even sometimes to help us with these citizen science projects. So you'll see there's things about birds, there's things about amphibians, invertebrates, fish, reptiles, right? There's a whole variety out there for somebody who might be interested in helping to collect scientific data. So we're going to start in on just a couple of different ones, and we're going to start with one of my favorite groups of animals. I won't lie, I like a lot of different animals out there. And this one is Maine's Amphibian and Reptile Atlasing Project, or MARAP for short. And one of the fun things about reptiles and amphibians is they're waking up right now. So not only are they kind of fun because you can get a little closer to them than other species, right? Of course, always being safe and respectful of the wildlife, but they kind of help remind us that the season's changing, right? They kind of give us little reminders and kind of help us track the change of time. So let's see, about a month or so ago, we were starting to hear and maybe see spring peepers, and wood frogs were starting to sing, right? So we're like, oh, I just noticed that. But guess what? That was an observation that I just made about a species here in Maine. Or maybe you found your first snake of the season crossing the road. Always be careful around roads, of course. But this atlasing project is trying to document the distribution and relative abundance, as well as kind of places where different rare species might be. And they're collecting this information, and they're going to make a publication out of this, and some more information for the biologists to have as well. But several years ago, there was the Maine Amphibians and Reptiles publication that came out in collaboration with some universities, and they're going to update that. So if you want to contribute, there's a couple different ways. We'll start with the online paper version. So say you're not into technology. I'm sure you hear all the time, like, oh, you can just do this on Facebook. You can do this on your smartphone, right? Whatever. But you can still submit data through paper. It is easier for you and our biologists if you do have a smartphone and you're able to do this on your smartphone. But you can go to mafishwildlife.com and you can click and download the PDF and print it, and you can do a data submission that way. They definitely want you to do that with rare species, like maybe the black racer, but there's an easier way to submit data to this Maine Amphibian and Reptile Atlasing Project. There is inaturalist.org, and it is also an app that you can download on your phone. And I cannot stress enough how very cool and very fun this app is. Not only does this app help you contribute to citizen science, but it can help you learn a little bit about identification of species. And it's very simple to use. You take your phone or your camera, if you're planning to upload it online later, and you take a picture. You upload it to iNaturalist. It gives you some suggestions of what you saw. You click submit. It's that simple. Photo, share it, and then the scientists can go ahead and collect that information off of iNaturalist and add it to their database for helping to figure out more information about the amphibians and reptiles here in Maine. Now, if you want to, you can go straight to the Maine Amphibian Reptile Atlasing Project page on iNaturalist, and you can see what other observations people have made. And here you can see on this map all those little orange pixelated dots. And if this was a live image on the website, you would be able to kind of zoom in and scroll through the observations and see what kind of different species were noticed where. As you can see, there's been a lot of observations made in southern Maine. So maybe you want to challenge yourself and contribute a little bit even more, and you want to take a road trip to northern Maine. There's a lot of places in northern Maine where we're still looking for some observations. So you can go ahead up there and check that out. You could also, if you really want to get into it, find out what species haven't been seen maybe in your county or town from our biologists, and make it kind of like a scavenger hunt. But of course, always remember to be mindful and respectful of yourself, of the animals, and any landowners. So that's one project that uses Inaturalist. Another project that's using Inaturalist is the Maine Bumblebee Atlas. Now, all three of these projects on the screen, they're kind of in post data collection phase. And what that means is the Maine Dragonfly and Damselfly survey and the Maine Butterfly survey, they've kind of are in the processing their data and moving on to publications phase. The Maine Bumblebee Atlas, on the other hand, only just finished most of their data collection. And if you do come across a bumblebee, you can still submit it this season. But take a picture, because bumblebees can be very tricky to identify. For example, this picture here is the tricolored bumblebee, not to be confused with the rusty patch bumblebee, which is a rare one. It's a tongue twister. And you can submit that picture of a bumblebee on Inaturalist the same way you would do that for the reptiles and amphibians here in Maine. And again, you just have to be taking these pictures in Maine and upload them to Inaturalist. It's that simple. So these projects have a really great smartphone connection. Again, there are sometimes paper data sheets as well. So in case you don't do the smartphone thing, there are other ways. Now, let's see, it's what, April 20th, a couple days away from Earth Day. So we're reaching the end of amphibian migration. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but in the springtime, amphibians are migrating. And so when it gets kind of warm, generally above 40 degrees, you get some rainy evenings, amphibians start to move from the forest where they live and where they overwinter, and they start migrating towards these small temporary pools called vernal pools. And they're doing this for one reason. They're going to lay their eggs. And because they're amphibians, they have some really cool, special kind of slimy skin, most of them. And so they like it when it rains. So for example, this coming Wednesday is going to be a rainy, warm evening. That'd be the perfect time to go out and find a spot where, there's a lot of amphibians and you can look for them. So this is a really fun project. This is not an MDIFW project per se, but it is one that we support. Greg Leclerc, he is a local professional. He runs the Maine Big Night, and he does coordinate a lot with our biologists and helps share and contribute data. And so you do have to sign up though, because there are some safety protocols, because you're going to be around roads. So you need to be really careful about that. So this is one that young children are not generally recommended to do, but it's really rewarding, because not only are you going out and you're counting all the different species that you might see, but you're also getting to help them safely cross the road. Of course, you need to be safe as well, but you can gently and carefully pick them up and help them move across the road in the direction they're going. Maybe it's towards their pond, but you're going to help them get out of the road, as well as record every single one that you see. So right here on the screen, we have a couple different species. The frog, it's kind of tan. It's got a little bit of like a dark mask around its eyes. That is the wood frog. They're the ones that sound a little bit like a duck quacking. The one to the side of that, the yellow one, the yellow spots, that is the spotted salamander. And then the one above that is the blue spotted salamander. All of these are different amphibian species of Maine that you could see on these nice warm, rainy evenings. So you can go to the Maine Big Night webpage for more information. Again, they're almost done for the season. It only goes to the end of April, but you can sign up and you can adopt a site on a road near you, and you can go out and count these species and help them cross the road. So it's a really great way for us to learn more about the abundance of Maine species. And while you're out there, why not upload any pictures you take to Inaturalist, and then you're also doing a different project. So that's just some of our amphibian projects. But say amphibians are not your thing. You don't like to go out at night. That's fine. There's also a lot of bird projects, and birds tend to be a little bit more of a daytime species unless you're studying owls. And we have a couple of different projects that our biologists are working on right now. There is the Heron Observation Network of Maine and the Maine Bird Atlas. And the Maine Bird Atlas is kind of a join at any time, whereas the Heron Observation Network is you need to sign up, get the protocols, and figure out what you're doing beforehand. So we'll start with the Heron Observation Network of Maine. So if you're not familiar with great blue herons, they are a wading bird, which means they have long legs that they use to walk in shallow water, hunting things like fish, frogs, and pretty much anything that maybe they could swallow down their mouth hole. So sometimes it's things like snakes. I have seen one go for a small turtle. You know, they're kind of opportunistic that way, but because that's what they hunt out in the wetlands, they also nest out in the wetlands. So this project is having people adopt a heron colony site. Herons form these rookeries or colonies where they nest up in trees. And back in 2007, the great blue heron was actually listed as a species of special concern. And their colonies were in decline, especially along the coast of Maine. And so this project aims to figure out if this decline is still occurring. Is it occurring coastally? Is it statewide? And kind of identifying where there's active colonies and what the trends are. Because understanding how the nesting colonies are doing can tell you a lot about how that species will do in the future. So this is a fun one you can do. It starts soon. It's going to start in May. And you can either go once in May or the beginning of June, or you can go periodically over time between May through August. And you can access information about this one through our citizen science portal off of our website. And here you can see is just a screenshot of the map showing all sorts of different heron colonies. And you can see in the key that some of them are inactive or active, or they haven't been surveyed yet. So if this is something that interests you, you can go to this page and you can click the inquire button right there, that little orange bar, and you can learn more information about this project in ways that you could maybe adopt a colony. Maybe you can find one kind of near you. You can go to it year after year and see if there's any nesting herons there. There's also a great blog about this project off of our blog page on our website. You can learn all about the Heron Observation Network and also about the heron tracking project that's going on. That's a separate project from this. They kind of are tracking to see where the herons are going when they migrate. We actually have put these little GPS backpacks on, our biologist Danielle and her team, and some volunteers, and she also often works with school children as well. And they have caught one that passed through here from Canada, and they found it was going down to the Caribbean. And then they watched it come back, and it's neat because you can see the pathway and which way they migrate. So I definitely recommend checking out and learning more about the Heron project. Now, this one does sound a little bit more complicated, is a little bit more than just a cell phone data collection, but you don't need a lot of equipment. You'll get a whole little protocol, volunteer guidelines, and everything that you need to know. And it's pretty simple to follow. Danielle does a great job of making sure of that. But you are going to need some binoculars. You're going to probably want bug spray because you're going into wetlands. You might need some rubber boots depending on what the wetland looks like for being able to get a clear view of the birds. You don't have to get right up to the nest, but you do want to have a clear view of all the trees that could potentially have a nest in them. And again, this is starting soon, so if you're interested, I definitely recommend reaching out and adopting a colony, and there are definitely still colonies in need of adoption. So it's a lot of fun. Last year I did it, and I found a nest in a site that we weren't sure there would be a nest, and there were little baby herons in the nest, and they look kind of funny without all their feathers, almost like some pterodactyl or something, but it's pretty fun. I recommend doing it. All right, maybe you don't want to adopt anything. You just want to casually go birding and submit your observations. Well, then the Maine Bird Atlas is the one for you. And this one is a 5-year project that is out to document the distribution and relative abundance of all breeding and wintering birds across the entire state of Maine. And so birds face a lot of challenges for survival. Maybe it's habitat loss, window collisions, outdoor cats, issues with changing weather patterns, things like that. There's a lot of threats that birds face. So it is a priority for MDIFW to do this atlas, which they're typically done every like 20 years or so, and lots of states do them. And here in Maine, we split it into 2. You can do the breeding atlas, which is during any breeding season for different birds here in Maine. So some are breeding now. Owls started breeding back in February, typically, some of them, and others don't start for like another month or so. Those do have different criteria and ways to submit data, but the winter bird atlas, which is December through March, can be a little simpler. It's just more about what birds you see. So here is a checkerboard map of Maine. And one of the ways they make sure they're collecting data throughout Maine and not just say southern Maine around Portland is they aim to identify as many species as possible in each of these blocks. And so there's all sorts of volunteer coordinators and staff and partners from different organizations that are helping to make sure that this gets done. And one of the places that they're actually really still looking to get data on some different bird species is up north. So kind of similar to that amphibian and reptile map I showed you earlier. So maybe a road trip up north to identify some species might be in order this year. But it's a lot of fun, and you can do this just from your smartphone. You'll need to download the EBird app and learn the protocols for it, and you'll need a good pair of binoculars. And you probably need to make sure you can identify at least a few species of birds, since that is the goal here, is to identify as many different species in certain areas throughout the entire state of Maine. But don't worry, there's a really good, very detailed website where you can go and learn all about how this works right through our citizen science portal on our webpage. You can read past blogs, you can figure out how to get started. There's even contact information in case you get lost along the way. And there's even ways to submit data on paper if you don't have a smartphone. And it just so happens that tomorrow night at 6:30, they're having their 2021 season kickoff meeting. So you can either go to the Maine Bird Atlas Facebook page to register, or go to the Maine Bird Atlas blog on our webpage to register. So that's tomorrow evening at 6:30 as the Maine Bird Atlas 2021 season kickoff meeting. And I highly recommend attending. It's a great time to ask questions, learn more information. And again, they're just a little bit past halfway on this project. So they're definitely looking to target certain areas of Maine. So if you want to participate, I would make sure you attend tomorrow night's meeting as well. All right, I know a lot of people in Maine really like deer. And so there's this project called Maine Deer Spy. It's pretty fun. You can just do it on the fly. However, it hasn't started yet. You have a lot of time until this one gets started. This one isn't until late summer and goes into early fall. And the goal of this project is to estimate the recruitment of new deer to the herd. So what does that mean? It means we want to know how many fawns are being added to the deer population this year. So although you can submit every and any deer observation that you make from late summer through early fall, we really want to know about does with fawns. And you can go right on our website. It's not updated just yet because, well, it's not late summer yet. We still have a few months to go, but you'll be able to submit the data right online or print off a PDF data sheet to go ahead and mail that in. And there's contact information there as well. Last year during the study, a volunteer took this photo, and you can see down there kind of just over the edge of the lawn towards maybe like a pond or something, there's the doe. Next to her is one fawn. And then of course there's 3 more up on the lawn. So that's 4 fawns with 1 doe. I was informed by our biologist that this is a very rare thing to see. Typically, a doe will have 1 to 2 fawns with her. 3 is rare, 4 is very rare. But the good news is they all look pretty healthy. So that might be 4 new deer added to the herd from this one doe. So that's pretty impressive and neat. And if you ever see things like this, our biologists do like to get photographs and things that they can use as part of their study. And people like me and them can use when we share presentations and information with members of the public. So it's definitely nice to share your photographs as well. All right, and I told you earlier that there's a way for, as a fisherman, that you can contribute more data. And this is a fun one because you can do it year round. The only catch is you have to get this little personal fishing record book, which you can either call us and we can mail to you, or you can go to your regional wildlife office and ask for one. But you might want to call ahead because our fisheries biologists are not always in the office, as they do have to do field work. Now, this book has directions right inside the flap, and really all it is every time you go out fishing, you record where you are, the dates, the times, everything like that. And every fish you catch, when you keep it or you throw it back, you're collecting information on it. What species is it? Did you keep it or release it? What's the length? Are there any fins that are damaged? And if you have a scale, what's its weight? And all that information, at the end of the calendar year, you send this booklet back to your regional office, and they enter all this data in, and it helps them to get a better, broader picture of the waterways across Maine. Now, they're still going out and doing their own more detailed surveys, but this kind of helps them get a nice, broader look about the health and distribution of different fish species across Maine. So there was a lot of different things, and you can always rewatch this and check out our webpage for more information. But I really think you should get involved. And if these pictures are any indication, it's a lot of fun to get out there and be doing citizen science and to be participating in all sorts of recreation here in Maine. It's fun, you make great memories, you're contributing to scientific work, and your volunteer efforts help the biologists. Even when they're applying for federal funding, they can show that there's volunteer support, and it can help them in that way as well. So keeping track of your volunteer hours is important too. And the best part is you really don't need a lot of equipment to do these projects. Maybe you need a notebook, maybe you need binoculars, maybe you need a phone, but you can always go online and learn what you need. You can get data sheets, you can read about the projects, you can get updates on the projects, and well, there's a picture of Danielle. There's always friendly staff there to answer your questions and help you out. There's a lot of really great people that we work with, whether it's partners or our own staff, to help answer your questions and help you get started with a project. And to top it off, you're seeing some cool animals and you're going to some really pretty places. So, I mean, what a better way to spend maybe your Saturday. Or just maybe you're on vacation and you're just going to submit incidental data that you see. You just happen across a turtle or you see a certain bird species, right? That is contributing your wildlife observations to our data. So again, you could always rewatch this to learn more, or you can go to our website if you want to kind of check out some more of these in some more detail. But I want to thank you guys for joining us. I know it was a lot of information, but you know, it's pretty fun to get to talk about these things with all of you. I myself participate in a lot of these projects.
Great, thank you, Laura. That is so much amazing information, and I think the audience is they're probably still trying to wrap their mind around all the great ways they can participate. We did have a question come in early on, so I'll go ahead and ask that one. If, for instance, I'm reporting birds, do I report the ones I see every day, like blue jays, or just each new one as I see them, meaning every day report seeing the blue jay? So I think that's referring to the Bird Atlas project.
Yeah, so when you're doing this, I mean, you can't know for certain that you're always seeing the same bird. So you can definitely keep submitting that. The goal of the project is to see different species across the entire state. So you wouldn't have to, but it's still great to go ahead and submit that observation each day. I mean, if you're sitting at your feeder and you see a blue jay and it flies away, and 15 minutes later another one comes in, well, there's probably a pretty good chance that's the same one. So that one you might not have to submit, but you can still submit daily feeder observations.
Great, thank you. And I'll just remind everybody, we will take questions. So if you want to go ahead and type them into the chat, you're welcome to do so. In the meantime, I do actually have some questions for Laura, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So one of the questions actually that I have is, what you participate in these, you know so much about them. What's your background?
Yeah, so I have a little varied background. I actually went to school and I studied wildlife biology, and I did a couple different years studying and helping out as a wildlife biology technician as summer projects across New England. And then I made the transition into doing environmental education work, working at nature centers, zoos, Disney's Animal Kingdom. And I really found a passion for sharing the information that I know about wildlife. I still like to get out in the field, which is, I think, is why I really enjoy citizen science work. But I do have a background in both education and biology.
Great, thank you. So if I want to get into this and I want to start participating in some of these efforts, can I bring a friend who hasn't been trained? Is it possible for me to just sort of get some people involved who maybe I just want to introduce and give them the opportunity to experience it? Is that okay?
Yeah, it is definitely okay to bring friends. In fact, it's definitely encouraged to do that. We always want to make sure that one person, at least in the party, is trained or familiar with the protocols. And it's always great to encourage your friends to maybe do a little reading before you go out so they're prepared. But really, as long as at least one of you is trained and understands what's going on, definitely bring friends, bring family, and of course, make sure you're following all safety guidelines.
Thank you. And so you did cover this a bit in your presentation, but I do want to make sure that everyone at home is crystal clear. Do you need a smartphone to be able to participate in these?
You do not need a smartphone to participate in these. As we always say, even though we like to try to transition to using technology because it can be easier for those who do have it, and it makes kind of compiling the data go a little bit quicker, you don't need to, and we don't want people to be discouraged if you don't have a smartphone. You can typically go to your library or someplace where you can download information, data sheets, and you can mail those in or scan them and email them in. So no, for actually all of these, you don't need a smartphone, but it does help sometimes.
That's great to know. And I do know that teachers at home or teachers are working from home and their classrooms are all virtual now. And I bet they're looking for resources, and I'm sure you get requests every day from teachers looking for resources. If a teacher wants to participate in some of these, say have their class monitor a site for the Heron Project or amphibian road crossings, is that possible? How can teachers incorporate these into their classrooms?
Yeah, so teachers can definitely decide to adopt a location as a class. Maybe what the teacher does is the teacher gets trained and they review what they're going to do with the class. Of course, the age of the students will vary for what they can do. Obviously, younger students, you may want to stick to a more simpler project of more like incidental observations of amphibians or birds. But especially if you have older students who are able to help and you do have easy access to maybe a road site for these vernal pools where the amphibians are crossing, or there's a heron colony nearby, is definitely something you can engage older students in. Typically middle school or older would be best suited for these kinds of projects. And you may want to have them do it in small groups, especially if you're doing like the heron colony, so you're not all going in with like 20 kids at once. But there are ways you can easily incorporate this. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but the Heron Observation Network, if you go to the blog, there's actually links on there for teachers about lessons and ways to incorporate it into the work you're doing. So it's a great way, like I said, to incorporate environmental-based education.
Great, thank you. And a great question came in from the audience. Amber just asked, is there a website that provides info on public land, such as private versus public? And we know that Maine is over 95% privately owned, and landowner relations is such a critical piece of recreating in Maine. Laura, do we have resources for people to help them navigate that?
Yeah, you can go on our website to learn more about land access. You can also, so some of these are site specific, so you would be assigned a location, and if it is on private land, we do typically have contact information for you to reach out to the landowner before you get there. You want them to be aware of what's happening. We never want to just show up and go into a private land without permission. So that is one aspect. But you can also go on our webpage to find out information about, like, say, our WMAs. We have a great news story map that just came out where you can learn about and find those locations nearest you. So you can zoom in on the map to an area near you and identify wildlife management areas in your area as well. So a lot of great resources out there to help you.
Yes, and I will do a plug if you're looking for information about privately owned land. There are applications available for your phone, such as Onyx, that will show you the boundary lines. It is important to know who the neighbors are. Just make sure that if you do cross over, the activity you're doing is allowed. And of course, you can always check town records or websites, or either in person, to really dive in if you're looking for that information. We did have a question come in here, and it is a little bit about, is there a difference between reporting birds to Cornell, Merlin, and Maine wildlife?
So Cornell, so eBird is part of that. So when you report to eBird, it is being reported to Cornell, and our biologists can harvest the data off of that the same way we do with Inaturalist. I'm not quite as familiar with Merlin, but I believe a lot of those databases, there are ways for our biologists to connect them, but that's why it's important to figure out which databases people are using for their citizen science. So for Bird Atlas, they're using eBird. For the Maine Amphibian and Reptile Atlasing project, they're using iNaturalist. So knowing which way to submit your data is important, but yeah.
So Lily in the audience just typed in that I loved your presentation, and also I love birds, and we love them too.
Me too. I am very fond of birds. I only have one bird decoration behind me today, but my house is filled with them. I need to get more reptile and amphibian decorations, I think, though.
Yes. So a couple more questions I have. Well, it looks like the audience is getting a little chatty, and I want to encourage them to ask their own questions. But in the meantime, Laura, if someone sends in their fishing record, do they get that back? I know that a lot of anglers might covet that. It might be something they don't want to give to somebody and then not see back in their possession.
Yeah, typically our staff keep the books, but you might be able to figure out a way. Maybe they can help you photocopy or scan pages of your book, so you can still keep your own records as well. But no, they typically keep the hard copy that you submit. So this little book that you send in, it's pretty small. You can keep it right in your tackle box. But yeah, you do have to turn it in at the end of the calendar year. I know that can be a bummer, but you can always photocopy, take pictures with your phone, or just talk to your regional biologist and see if you can work something out.
Great, thank you. And so I think it's important for us to note, maybe if we're sending people outside, how can someone be safe while they're recreating or just doing some of these activities?
Yes, you definitely want to make sure you're being safe, because it's not going to be very enjoyable if something happens. So first things first is know where you're going and tell somebody when you're going to return. That's definitely something very important. We don't want people getting lost. And if you don't return, we want someone to know where you are in case you got hurt or maybe you got a flat tire. So always be prepared. Make sure you're bringing sunscreen and bug spray with you. Have enough water. And if you're not going to be out by roads at any point in time, there's a lot of guidelines within these projects about safety, but things like having flashlights, a reflective vest, things like that to help protect yourself while you're out there, and being mindful of who's in your party. Is what you're doing appropriate for young children, or is it really for older children and adults? Because not every citizen science project will work well with young kids as far as safety is concerned. So just plan ahead.
Absolutely. And if people are looking to connect with the department or maybe connect with the outdoors, are there other ways that they can do that outside of just citizen science projects?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can connect either with the department or the outdoors. If you don't already follow us on social media, I highly recommend it. From Instagram to Facebook, there's a lot of different information shared about things you can do and connect for the outdoors safely. You can also go to things like our Swan Island location has a campground. You can go online and look up wildlife management areas near you and see a nice place to go hiking or exploring. There's also our Maine Wildlife Park, which is open right now. You can go online and make a reservation to attend and go see some of the non-releasable wildlife of Maine and learn a little bit more about the department while you're there. So a lot of different things. And I should also mention, especially since I know some of us are on spring break right now or April vacation, is if you go to our website, there's also some really great programs underneath our outreach and education programs. You can find resources, activities to do in your own backyard, anything from keeping a nature journal to learning how to create a sit spot in your own backyard, scavenger hunts, and there's even programs that are on there for adults that you can learn about as well. So a lot of different things.
Wonderful. And a question did just come in from the audience. Amber is a resident of New Hampshire, but spends a lot of time in Maine. Are they able to partake in the fish book project as well?
Yeah, anybody actually can participate in any of these projects. The thing is, you just have to be within the boundaries of Maine. So we don't want you catching fish in New Hampshire and adding those to the book. That's not going to be very helpful for our data collection. But if you live in New Hampshire, anytime you come fishing in Maine, whether it's ice fishing or open water, take out that little book with you and write in what kind of fish you catch. But just make sure you're only putting Maine fish in there from Maine waterways, not New Hampshire.
Laura, thank you very much for that answer. We don't have any other questions coming in the chat. Do you have any final thoughts for those watching at home?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I think this is a really fun way to engage yourself and even sometimes encourage ourselves to get outdoors, making this commitment to participate in citizen science, maybe that push you need to get out on certain days to collect that data. But keep learning more, watch all these different videos on YouTube to learn more about the work that's being done and the wildlife here. In fact, there's a really great one coming up on Thursday about vernal pools, and that actually connects right in with amphibians and reptiles. So get out there, give it a try, and maybe start with an easy one. Start with one that's just maybe finding random amphibians and reptiles as you're out on a hike. Start small and work your way up maybe to a bigger project.
That's great advice. I just want to thank Laura for giving us this wonderful presentation, and for everybody at home who joined us this evening. I do hope everyone joins us next week for the vernal pools presentation. It's next week, right, Laura?
It's this Thursday on Earth Day at 7 p.m.
Wow, we have a busy week this week.
We do.
So I hope everyone joins us for that. I cannot wait to watch it myself.